Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Course Development Workshop Series. My name is Kate Johnson, and I am the Associate Director of Faculty Development here at UAGC. Thank you so much for those of you who are a sixth-time attender or have attended as many sessions as you could, or if this is your first session, welcome. This workshop is specifically developed and rolled out each month to support faculty in their ideating and planning for course development. So let's look at our agenda real quick. I'm not going to get stuck on that, and I'm not moving forward because I'm not on the right page. All right, click forward. Again, we're going to do a quick recap, intro to feedback, faculty perspective, rubric and feedback, and then putting it into practice. Okay, so what do we know so far? So far, session 1 was getting started with CLOs, session 2, creating good CLOs, backward design, scaffolding the summative, formative assessment, and now session 6, feedback. So I'm going to kick the introduction to feedback off to Diana.
Hello, everybody. So we like to start from the beginning. So what is feedback? Quality feedback is constructive, specific, measurable, sensitive, and balanced. That's according to Quality Matters. It is more than just a way for you to provide praise and explain missing points on an assignment. It's also a formative assessment tool that allows faculty to guide students toward meeting learning outcomes and objectives. So we spent 2 workshop series talking about learning objectives. So we all know how important they are to the learning process. Next slide, please. As you know, this is a course development workshop presentation. So how does feedback relate to course development? So as you're listening to what everyone talks about today, think about how when you're designing an assignment and your learning activities, think about how you are going to have your associate faculty provide feedback. How can you help guide them towards meeting those student learning objectives? How can what you're doing when you're creating your assignments be thinking about the feedback you want them to give to your students? So you could even think about creating a facilitator guide, embedding it in the classroom. So under the faculty resources, I put a little screenshot there in case you're not aware that you can do that. And this will share how faculty could use feedback to meet specific learning objectives in specific assignments. This is a place where you could provide examples and expectations on the feedback that you want your faculty to provide students. So just kind of be thinking about the overall how you're creating your assignments and your learning objectives and what kind of feedback that you want your instructors to provide while everyone else is presenting.
Thanks, Diana. And we will pass the baton to Trisha.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see all of you virtually. Want to double back to the conversation that we had at the last session about feedback and how important it is as part of formative assessment. Remember that feedback is information about how we are doing in our efforts to reach a goal. I always appreciate getting feedback from you all in course development, from Sarah, my supervisor, about how I'm doing in my role, from my team in ways that I can help them improve and meet their priorities and projects. Remember that we want feedback, as Diana mentioned, to be specific, timely, and we talked last time about it being non-evaluative when possible, and especially goal-related. And the purpose of that is to give students opportunities to revise and improve their work and deepen their understanding. I remember when I was in 10th grade, I will never forget, Spanish 4, with Senorita Benson, and she always, the fact that I can remember it is because I have nightmares about it, but she always would make us go back and redo our work, and it was because she wanted us to master the Spanish language. And I tell you what, she was at the time probably my least favorite teacher, But now in hindsight, I can remember how much I learned from her and how I really excelled at the Spanish language, because she gave us so much feedback that was non-evaluative, specific, timely, and related to goals. And it really helped all of my classmates learn and grow. Remember, formative assessment includes feedback as described earlier, and it's related to learning goals. If you ask your students, which we often do in focus groups and in surveys, they want feedback and they want it specific to them rather than generic and not tailored to exactly how they have performed on a formative or summative assignment. They want it in a timely fashion, which is a tricky balance for us, right? Because our courses go so rapidly that it's critical as we move through our courses with the assignments that often build upon one another to get feedback back to the students quickly so that they can pivot and adjust as needed for the following week. Actionable, something that they can use to improve concretely. Now, what is it that they can do? Saying I need more details is great, but details around what? What is it that I could have done as a student to improve and have maybe earned a higher score? And then ongoing and consistent. This is something that we hear a lot about in surveys, is giving consistent feedback, not only within a course, but also across courses, thinking about a program. How might we consider how we give feedback so that it is consistent, regardless of who the instructor is? Another important element is to consider the quality of the feedback over the quantity. Rather than commenting on every paragraph, how might we give robust feedback that is actionable, that is consistent, that gives students an opportunity to improve, rather than a bunch of small snippets that might not be as helpful as we might intend for it to be. And then the last thing I want to remind everyone to consider is how you model giving feedback is often how students will give feedback to one another in the discussion forums, for example. So the feedback you provide in the modeling that you show in your course often serves as an example for how students might behave and interact. And I would encourage all of you to use that as an opportunity as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Tricia. And let's bring in Jen Zauer for our faculty perspective.
So what does this mean for us as faculty, right? Not only when we are developing our courses, but also when we are facilitating our courses, and how we can use that feedback to help us and we'll talk a little bit later again about the assessment cycle that we looked at in our last session, and how the feedback we give really helps to continue to inform our design decisions. There's several things that we can do. Right, we really want to make sure that our feedback is balanced. And when we talk about balance, we're talking about balance between content-related feedback and feedback related to things such as APA or grammar or mechanics. And thinking about when we look at the assignment directives, when we're writing those assignment directives as course developers, oftentimes we see that 80 to 90% of our assignment directives are related to content, and about 10 to 20% of our assignment directives are related to using sources, APA formatting, mechanics, etc. So when we're providing feedback, we want to mirror that, and we want to balance our feedback so that we're providing feedback proportionally in regards to the expectations on the assignment. If you're crafting a course, let's say you're crafting an English course and the grammar and APA and mechanics are related to your course learning outcomes, then your assignment directives are going to be more proportionally related to feedback related to those elements. So really looking at that as a course developer and thinking about what is the balance in my assignment directives, and then how can I translate that balance into the feedback I'm providing. Also working on making sure that when we share feedback, that we're really highlighting successes and struggles. And I was really intentional when I wrote that one about putting successes first, right? We always want to make sure that we're helping our students to know that we see the wonderful and great things we're doing. And sometimes we know that it's a challenge to find some of those successes in the assignments we're grading or the discussions we're looking at, but really finding and highlighting those successes. And we can always go back to the assignment directives that we have to look for specific content criteria that we can highlight, and then balancing that with their struggles so that we can provide specific and actionable and measurable feedback that can help them continue to grow. Going back to using those assignment directives for guidance. I know that when I am working on developing a course, we make our assignment directives, kind of those bullets with the content criteria, as clear and clean and crisp as they can be, so that when we're providing feedback, we know specifically what we're looking for, and using those directives to help write the feedback that's provided to students. Kind of tagging on Trisha's point about how we're modeling for our students with feedback. We do that a lot with our tone and disposition in the way that we share and provide feedback. So keeping in mind, are we sharing a positive tone even when we're sharing some constructive feedback with our students, and bringing that in so that they can hear us talking to them and know that we're there to help in the feedback we're providing, and it's designed to help inform their instruction. A lot of us have talked about in these sessions and in other course development settings about how we are scaffolding assignments throughout our courses. And so considering how can we bring that scaffolding element into the feedback we're providing? If we know that something a student is doing on a week 2 assignment is going to lend support to something they're doing on their summative assignment, how can we make sure that comes across in our feedback to those students? Looking at ways to be really specific in terms of embedding resources. If we say to a student, you're struggling with APA formatting, let's put a resource there for them. It could be a resource such as referring them to the Writing Center, but it could also be a resource to a specific document you have. Maybe you have in your course design, in a course I just developed, we are doing some things with open-ended questions, and we created an open-ended resource or open-ended questions resource with the Writing Center. So if a student is struggling, linking them back to that resource and thinking about when we're designing, what resources am I putting in my course that I can specifically refer the students back to in terms of feedback. And then this last one, I actually can't take credit for. My dear colleague, Amy Johnson, introduced this strategy to our team, but it's the Easter egg strategy. And you might be wondering what that is. But what it is we hide a little Easter egg in our feedback that we're sharing to our students. So we use one called the hidden word. So I'll put like hidden word pineapple or hidden word rainbow, hidden word jellyfish, and hide it in the feedback. And then I ask my students if they find it to send me a message. And the logic there is we spend a lot of time when we are crafting assignments, making sure that we have opportunities to provide feedback, and a lot of time as faculty when we're teaching, giving feedback. So we want to make sure our students are using that feedback. So on the next slide, Kate, we just wanted to highlight a couple of examples of what this actually looks like when we're incorporating all of these different elements into the feedback that we're providing. And Diana talked about how as course developers, when we're developing, there is that option when you're developing a course to create that hidden instructor resources tab where you can craft some sample feedback that you might have for instructors that's specific and connect it back to the assignment, that's links to resources you might have in the course, that is mirrored after those assignment directives, so that you're giving a starting point for faculty who are teaching. We know that everyone has their own style and their own touch that they like to put on feedback, but that's a way to utilize that tab that Diana's talking about in terms of course developer, of creating some banks of resources that can be used. So I'm not going to read that whole example to you. I hope you were reading while I was talking, but this is an example of that summative feedback that we can share either in waypoints, if it was an assignment, or we can share feedback like this if we are in a discussion forum and it's in SpeedGrader and we have students who need specific and measurable and resources to help. Next slide, Kate. And then we wanted to just share example too of we don't always have to put all of the specific feedback right in that summative feedback, but that we can use those in-text features in Waypoint to provide feedback too. And really thinking back to when we're providing our feedback, how does the feedback relate to our assignment directive? And how does that feedback relate to the course learning outcomes that are mapped? Remember, we talked in some of our first few series about the mapping elements, and within each discussion and assignment, it says which weekly outcomes and which course outcomes things are connected to. So if you're trying to figure out how to make sure your feedback is aligned, look back at those when we're writing and developing curriculum. Making sure that that mapping is in place is so crucial to making sure that the feedback reflects what we're sharing. Holly, yes, I see your comment. It's feedback example with the Easter egg. So there is one here. So if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, you see where it says hidden word pineapple. So that's in there. And Kate, if you pop back, can you pop back one slide? Holly, do you, see where I highlighted in yellow? If you find my hidden word in your in-text comments, please email it to me. So I put that statement and I actually highlight it right in the summative feedback because it can get lost in there. So again, Amy Johnson's the one who shared that with us. So all the kudos to her, but it really has made a difference. And as a faculty member, it actually makes me more excited to put feedback in my students' papers because I know they're reading it. So try it out. You might find great success with it too. Thanks, Kate. I'm going to go ahead and pass things off.
All right. Thanks so much for that tip on the hidden word pineapple. Do you use pineapple every time? Do you change it up every week?
Great question. I change it up. So I will mix it up in the different weeks. And something else that I learned from Amy, because again, she modeled this for her early childhood team. Amy said, yeah, she changes up. We'll post an announcement, like, oh, I hit a word. Thanks to Amy, Nikki, Diana, and Natalie for sending me their hidden word. If you find your hidden word, please email it to me. And it's funny because the first week you only have a couple students at first who send it, and then you post the announcement and then you get a flood of messages and then they start to catch on and look for it. But it is really nice because you know that your feedback is being read, and it's helpful as an instructor to see. A lot of times the students will then actually ask questions because they've read the feedback, and then you can use that not only to inform your instruction, right? Thinking back to our topic from last week of formative assessment, if I'm getting the same questions from my students, then I can inform my instruction that way. But then it's something too that as a course designer, you can take notes on those things and say, okay, when I get to the next revision, I noticed the students were really struggling with this. We need to present it a different way or bring in a different resource. And as associate faculty, I know we have some associate faculty here too. Share those things with your faculty who are leading the courses that you're teaching, because you guys are the eyes and ears into so much of what's happening in our classroom. So if you're noticing those patterns of questions from feedback you're providing, share those with faculty so that they can use that to help inform future course revisions.
I just think it would be fun to thematically build your class. Like, your 6th term of the year is fruit, maybe it's Star Wars the next time. That's exciting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's kick it over to Nikki and Natalie to talk a little bit about the alignment between feedback and rubric. Nikki and Natalie.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So there are some things to consider, and there are some considerations to keep in mind when it comes to feedback, alignment, and rubrics. The first one is to tailor feedback to align with the Bloom's verbs in the assignment. So students should meet the level of the verb indicated in the rubric. For example, if the rubric criterion is asking students to explain something and the student simply just identifies it, be sure that you explain that in your feedback, and your feedback is robust related to the explanation that was expected. Another consideration is to think of pain points or common areas of opportunity that students have with the particular assignment. If you have taught the course several times, you can probably start to notice where some students may be having issues or need a little bit more details or need more resources. So this is where you can tailor your feedback in that way with those trends. If the course is scaffolded, you can also try to provide feedback about the content early in the course to avoid any confusion moving forward for the student. And then, as Jen mentioned, it's also a good opportunity to search for additional resources to have on hand to provide students in these certain areas that you've noticed trends in. And Nikki?
Thank you. And to really echo Tricia and Jen's sentiments, a lot of the feedback, especially within the rubric, whether it's your specific rubric content criteria or that optional additional feedback that many of our lead faculty choose to write in their rubrics, it really helps students improve their performance on if they want to subsequently revise their work, if they've, if there's an area of opportunity and the faculty's allowed them to resubmit the work, or to Natalie's point, if the assignment is scaffolded, if in week 1, for example, I'm thinking of ASH 101, which I teach, you're creating those SMART goals. Well, in week 5, you're going to create a development plan. So if students are already struggling, it's really important to provide them that feedback, whether it be in the rubric, in additional feedback, or in those in-text comments, to kind of help them as they go throughout the course. And again, to Jen's point, also focusing the feedback majority on content-related aspects of the rubric content criteria. So we understand that sometimes we may focus things on APA or writing, syntax, and mechanics, but understanding if the majority of the assignment is for the students to, create a development plan, making sure that your feedback is catered to that more so than, oh, this isn't spelled correctly, or this isn't, cited in APA properly, is really where you want to spend the majority of your time, because that's really going to help the student as they progress in your course. And then next slide, we're just going to show you a good example of some additional feedback. So this is in Business 311, and it is a great example of some additional feedback that was incorporated into the rubric. So I don't expect everybody to read all of this, but it really touches on some of the points that Jen and Diana made earlier. As you can see, there's a lot of kind of robust feedback. It's balanced. You can see where the faculty has pointed out the students' wins, good job, or you're correct on this, but also some areas of opportunity to help guide the student and kind of clarify issues that they may have gotten incorrect. So yeah, just a kind of a great example of something you can incorporate when you're writing your rubrics to really help your students for success, also to help yourself and your associate faculty to kind of provide them with some standard feedback that you can give to the students.
And just before we kick over to Amy for feedback and facilitation, Nikki brought up a great point about how, as you're developing your courses and you're thinking about scaffolding and moving your feedback, getting the faculty who are teaching your courses to offer the feedback that students need in order to get them to the summative assignment. You can, within the course itself, include in the instructor resources different ways that faculty can approach student feedback dependent upon how successful they were in meeting that formative assessment. So if the week 3 assignment is scaffolded to the summative assignment, then you have the ability to offer to your associate faculty, students struggled in this, potentially they need to be redirected here, or, helping them to understand your thought process as you were building the course is really helpful. As someone who has taught UAGC courses that I did not build, it's really helpful as someone who is not the builder of the course to have a strong understanding of what you were thinking as you were building the course. So let's go to Amy and feedback and facilitation.
Thank you so much, Kate. So as you all likely know, Canvas offers multiple areas where faculty can give feedback to students. And on this slide, I've highlighted announcements and emails because I think it's easy to always think about feedback in relation to evaluation. And I know Tricia touched on this briefly, but feedback and feed forward can be shared in emails and announcements to help students broaden their understanding of a topic, or allow students to examine a different perspective, or even to prepare students for future concepts that are going to be coming in upcoming modules. So let's take a look at how faculty now can use Prep Week to organize feedback to help students succeed. And if you could go to the next slide, please, Kate. Now, I really like what Kate and Diana touched on in terms of creating something for faculty or the course developers, creating something that can go into the faculty resources. But this is also something you can do as you are prepping for your course. So we'll start with the learning outcome for week 2 of a psychology course. And this learning outcome is explain the typical methods used to study cognitive psychology, including behavioral and psychological techniques. So we'll take this learning outcome and break it down. So if you could move, thank you, Kate. She's clairvoyant, Kate is. So did the student explain each of the typical methods? If not, on the other side, you can list all the typical methods used and then be prepared to share any missing resources to the student. And if you can go ahead and did any errors exist in the student's explanation of the methods? And if so, you can assemble and list clarifying feedback and resources to help the student get a stronger understanding of the various methods. And next slide, please, Kate. Did the student include both the behavioral and psychological techniques, or perhaps just one? So if the student only discussed one of the techniques, you can create a list of resources here to share with students that explains the missing techniques. Also, when you begin teaching, it will be worthwhile to make note of any student struggles. As Kate says, sometimes you're new to a course, but then when you teach it again, it's very valuable for you to give that feedback to your lead or future course developers. So you can not only provide feed forward again in future classes, if you find there are sticking points in certain elements of the class, but then it can also help if the class is being redeveloped. So again, this can be done in the form of emails, announcements, or even discussion forum posts sent out prior to the assigned work. And I'll kick it back over to, I think, Kate.
Going to Jen next. Jen's going to do a little putting it into practice.
All right, so we've shared a lot with you. So now we want to give you guys the opportunity to share with us. And Amy teed us up really well with her example of making sure to look at what that assignment directive was and to consider what specific and actionable and measurable feedback could be provided. So we're going to give you just a minute. On this slide, we have the assignment directive. We have what the student submitted as their content, and then we have some instructor feedback. So we want to give you just a minute to read through that, and then we're going to have a little dialogue regarding how we could work on this feedback to ensure that it's beneficial for the student. Okay, so when you're ready, let's go ahead and share in the chat. What do you notice about the feedback from the instructor? Yeah, so many great things, right? You guys are hitting the nail on the head. Oops, I hit the wrong thing. I hit Q&A instead of chat. There we go. With the right, it's negative. There's no praise. It's not talking about things they did well. It's limited to pointing out deficiencies. All of those things, right? It's got a huge focus on mechanics. And there actually was a little, if you can't see it, where it says this unit is spelled wrong and it had a little red squiggly line, but I forgot when you go to presenter mode, it takes those red squigglies off for you. So yeah, exactly. It's not personalized. It's just really generic. So thinking about what we shared in terms of providing feedback so that it's meaningful for your students, so that it's aligned to what those assignment directives are in order to support course learning outcomes. What could we do to modify this feedback in order to make it more effective and meaningful? Exactly, Jorge. Start with what the student did right. Jackie, I love it. Oh my gosh, student Billy, I think you are missing a Grammarly opportunity. Who knew Grammarly could have such a positive spin on it? But Jackie, you did it, right? So putting in that tone, let's take your writing from good to great. All of those things, giving the students specific curriculum approaches they might have discussed, Elena, exactly. They had the directive, to talk about how it was developmentally appropriate, how it's supported by a curriculum approach or model, and they didn't mention curriculum approaches, models, or theory anywhere in there. So helping to guide them. If we just said you didn't discuss curriculum approaches, models, our students probably didn't discuss it because they're probably unsure of what those things are, right? So going back to those assignment directives is really, really helpful. A lot of times when I'm working on creating some initial banks of feedback, I take the assignment directives and I work on crafting sentences that go with each of them, and then I modify and personalize from there. But that's a really great way to make sure that you're providing that specific feedback. It's like what Amy shared in that chart, and just plugging it in. So really working on those. And the great thing is once you craft them once, you have them and you can use them to modify and personalize as you move forward. And Marty, I agree. Sometimes the only positive feedback is thank you for your submission. And I think we've all probably seen papers like that, but it's still positive, right? You're still starting off on a positive tone, which is really important. And then we can make sure that we phrase those struggles that we're tackling in a positive way so that the student sees them as feedback that's helping them to grow rather than feedback kind of, saying what happened here. So really that tone comes in to be really, really important. Yeah. And then Lynn, you talked too about, they had hard work. Please do whatever they need to improve improve their work as respectful of their time and effort. And that we know that even when there's a lot of struggles in our papers, our students are putting in their time and effort. So acknowledging that and then helping to guide them with specific steps that they can take is really beneficial. Okay. Yes, Diana, exactly. You can be constructive without being critical. It's all about that tone element of it. So let's move. We're going to do one more putting it into practice. Kate, if you want to hop to the next slide. All right. Same thing. So we have our assignment directive. We have what the student included, and then we have some instructor feedback. So when you're ready, you can post in the chat what you notice about this current instructor feedback. Holly, that's a great strategy, including a screenshot of the directions to kind of help them if they've missed the mark and to direct them back to it. I think that's a great way, right? The more we can point them back to those assignment directives, the stronger our feedback is going to be. Exactly, Stephanie. What kind of details needed? It's non-specific on the content of the work. Think about if you were a student and you read this particular feedback, would you know what to do to change and to modify and to continue to grow? You wouldn't. You would know what you didn't do, but you wouldn't know what you needed to change and improve. So, okay, now we'll take a minute and share how could we modify this feedback? What might be some ways that we could enhance this feedback so that it's supportive for the student and that it will help them continue to grow? Yeah, Marty, that's a great. Take the time to define those two terms, right? They might not know. Again, I think we see that a lot with content that the students don't know. And to piggyback on Amy's point, when you're writing this feedback, and if you notice patterns and trends, if you notice that you're saying the same thing to all the students in your class, then that's a really great opportunity if you were the course developer to stop and pause and reflect on, did we present that content in a way that made sense? Or if you didn't develop the course, but to pass that information on to the lead faculty so they can use it. It reminds me of when I taught third grade and you would give a math test and everybody missed problem number 17, right? Something was probably either with the way that that question was asked on the test that didn't make sense, or the way that I taught the concept didn't make sense. So it wasn't that the students didn't know it, but it was that I needed to stop and pause and take that as feedback for myself as the instructor to reflect on, am I sharing enough additional resources? Am I providing enough of an explanation? So the feedback is there to help the students grow, but don't forget that lens of the feedback being there for you as an instructor to help you reflect to see how you can support your students as well. Yeah, I appreciate you using resources to support your points. Be sure to properly format and being specific by including the page number. You have some good initial thoughts. I want to hear more about X, Y, and Z. Exactly. You guys have got it. And we just really wanted to help to highlight that connection between tap on the development that is happening, tap on those directives and really use them to help guide you, because then everything's going to sync up and our students will have better success.
Thanks, Jen. What a great example for our faculty, and well done, learners in the workshop in your responses. All right, Diana, connection between feedback and course development.
Well, first, I think that our panels today did a great job of pulling this together for course development, giving some great ideas for how to really relate feedback to learning objectives, right? That's the whole purpose, is we want to make sure that those learning objectives are super clear so that when our faculty are facilitating these courses, teaching this content, that it's very easy for them to provide feedback. So here's just a little kind of process on how how feedback can kind of relate to course development. You think of it as a cycle. You're creating your learning objectives and you're creating assignments. And then assessment will happen and feedback is provided by your faculty. And that feedback should ideally relate back to the learning objectives, right? So when you're doing your course development, some things to consider. Is your vision for your course clear? Do you know where it falls in the whole, in your program, in the series, what they need to know before, what they need to know after, what they need to know to successfully pass this course, right? It's clear to you, but is it also clear to someone else? Are you absolutely sure, as much as you can be, that if you just hand your course to an associate faculty, they understand your vision? Are your assignment directives clear? Not just for students, but for the faculty who are going to have to provide feedback on those assignments. Are those directions clear to them too? Is it clear how those assignments relate back to the learning objectives? Is it clear to students? Is it clear to your faculty? Have you made it clear where faculty will need to focus their feedback? Amy shared a great strategy for when someone is facilitating a course, how they can spend their prep week going through the different assignments and looking at the learning objective, and then, you know, breaking it down, how they can gather feedback, you know, start mapping it out for themselves. But as a course developer, could you do something similar to provide to your faculty so that you can get them started on, for this assignment, the key point is that they understand this concept because they need it to meet the overall course objective that feeds into the overall program objective. So those kinds of things are just things that you can think about, really setting up the faculty who will be teaching your course for success when we're talking about feedback. Be thinking of other ways that they can provide feedback in the announcements, and like Amy was talking about, there's more than just assignment feedback, discussion feedback. There's lots of ways that you can use formative assessment through feedback in the classroom and relating it back to those learning objectives. Next slide, please, Kate. So we didn't want to leave you without giving you some additional resources. A little plug for our instructive feedback training in Workday that is available for all faculty to take. There's also a list of other feedback that you can share, and it is on CETL. If you search for feedback, all those resources are there and on the CETL website. I'll hand it back to Kate.
Thanks, Diana. So questions for developers and questions for associate faculty. What idea or strategy are you most excited to implement in your next course development project or in your current development project? Feel free to put into the chat anything that you might have learned from the panel today on feedback as it relates to either course development or as a teaching strategy. Thanks, Jackie. Fun and functional, two things at once. Actually reviewing the learning objectives and using them as a guide. You know what, it seems like it would be obvious that we do that, but sometimes we just jump in and we're looking at feedback and how students are doing, that we completely miss how the learning objectives can really drive how we're facilitating courses. It's a great point, Edwin. Love to figure out how to incorporate instructor resource shortcuts and shout outs for feedback. That's a great conversation that we should bring to the development dish. I think we've got some minds that can help us work through that, Dana. Examples and reminder, forward feedback. Yeah, Amy's a gem. We don't know what we would do without her. I tell her all the time, she can't ever leave. How to support associate faculty. Dan, that's such a key part to the success of a course, is ensuring that our faculty really understand the vision of what we're trying to accomplish and that they understand. It's important that our associate faculty understand where the course lives within the program that you're teaching, so that they are better able to help students reach those, the mastery level of those learning objectives. Putting the fun in functional. That's great, Jamie. Double check instructions for clarity. Yeah, Holly, and I would say, and Trisha can correct me if I'm wrong, I really think that Learning Mate is doing an incredible job of really helping with that clarity in the course development process. But great to make sure that you're offering that as well. And the Easter eggs. Absolutely. Well, everyone, thank you so much for coming. I believe we have one more left for the year next month. And then I believe we will be restarting in 2023. We haven't quite talked about what that schedule will be, but we're really excited that you guys joined us for today. We'll get that video uploaded to the playlist soon, and we will see you all at the Development Dish on Tuesday. Thanks.